And we'll be discussing that story further when we review the papers in about 5 minutes. But first, let's talk about Google. Is it too big? Today, the European Parliament is due to debate whether separating out search engines from other commercial services offered by firms such as Google would help ensure a level playing field on the World Wide Web. The Parliament doesn't actually have the power to break up Google, but the proposal underlines the concerns of some EU politicians about American dominance of the internet, could put pressure on the bloc's antitrust regulators to take a stronger line against Google. The United States is saying politicians should not try to influence the EU's ongoing antitrust inquiry into the company. The Commission's been investigating the firm for 4 years now, but has yet to reach a decision. Well, I'm joined by Kevin Poulter, Senior Associate at Bircham Dyson Bell. Nice to see you again, Kevin.
Morning.
So just tell us exactly what's going on here, because we've got the European Commission investigation and the European Parliament seems to be wading in as well.
That's right. The investigation has been going on, as you say, for 4 years, and as yet, no conclusions have been made. It's into the antitrust and dominant market position it's holding, whether that position has been abused in any way. What the Parliament's trying to do is to apply that little bit more pressure. As you say, they can't actually force a breakup of Google. What they can do is to add some influence to the Commission and encourage them to start taking some perhaps more robust action. And we should be careful. Google isn't mentioned in the draft motion as it is. It applies across the board to all search engines and is part of the digital strategy for Europe, including roaming charges and various other things for mobile phones. But obviously, the big story is Google is trying to be sort of cut back and cut down and put back in its place to a certain extent.
So how do we think this will play out? Because I must admit, listening to you, it sounds reminiscent of what Microsoft went through in the 1990s. Yeah. And it didn't go well for Microsoft, actually. It was a bit of a David and Goliath scenario, and we thought that Microsoft would be left intact, but it wasn't. That's right.
And we're similar. Actually, it's not quite the David and Goliath that it was then. We're seeing now that politicians are going to Google and seeking their support and their comments on policy, whereas back in the Microsoft days, it was probably Microsoft trying to woo the politicians. But you're right. Microsoft, I think, over a 20-year period, had billions in fines for breaching and abusing that position. Slightly different here, although there are several investigations, we should say, going on against Google. One in relation to the Android smartphone operating system, which comes preloaded with Google services. And it's a slightly different thing. We're talking about search results. There are any number of options out there for consumers to use any number of alternative search results. What we're seeing, though, is the dominance of Google services in Google's own results, which is probably not surprising.
And it's an all-round approach as well, isn't it? Because it's also looking at Google having to give information about who's searching for what and who's using what facilities. It's that whole privacy issue as well, right to be forgotten, etc., etc.
All of these
so it's a very broad look at Google on many levels. A lot could happen here, couldn't it?
There's been a lot of criticism over the past 6 months or so, ever since the summer, in terms of, we say, copyright, right to be forgotten. And with a change in leadership and a change in the European commissioners, the competition commissioner, it's now perhaps the way that the European Parliament is starting to swing their weight around and say we want some action taken.
All right, well, we definitely keep an eye on that. Thank you, Kevin, for making sense of this situation. The devil is always in the detail with these things. Now let's move on.